the king lost the war. And when the framers wrote the Bill of Rights, they remembered how important the press had been to winning their freedom.
They were accustomed to the idea that criticizing the government is a good thing to do. That became part of their idea of what it means to be in a democracy.
In a democracy where the idea is that the people would have the authority to select their leaders, then it was important for the people to actually know what the government was doing.
Democracy depends on an informed citizenry. In order for democracy to function effectively and to function with integrity, the public needs to know what's going on.
So the First Amendment says the government can't stop us from expressing ourselves.
The First Amendment carries these core principles that are all necessary in order for people to find their voice in a democracy.
It includes both freedom of speech and freedom of the press.
The freedom of speech protects us when we talk to each other, when we give speeches, and we put ideas forward. The press is an institutional means for spreading those ideas to a large number of people. So the freedom of speech and press work together.
Individual speakers could all, of course, give speeches and hand out leaflets and so on, but they saw the press as a more important player in an institutional sense in American democracy, and in a better position to keep the government honest, because the press had the capacity to use resources to learn information and to convey information in a broader way than an individual speaker could.
And the First Amendment protects both speech and the press from the government.
It says the government can't tell you to shut up because it doesn't like what you're saying.
So the First Amendment was ratified, and we've had total freedom of the press ever since, and this is the shortest civics film you've ever had to watch. No. In fact, the men who wrote and then ratified freedom of speech and freedom of the press were the very first ones to try to undo them.
When the government goes into motion in the 1790s, there's still a lot of debate about exactly what the Constitution means and exactly how far this new government can go. So they're arguing as to what the Constitution means, and these are the people who wrote it.
After George Washington left office, some of the framers tried to limit free speech in the press because they were afraid of war.
The Alien and Sedition Act was signed into law by President Adams in 1798. He is the leader of essentially a house divided.
France was growing in power, and as it threatened Europe and the US, fear of war increased tension between the two new political parties at home. President John Adams, a Federalist, signed the Alien and Sedition Acts into law. He was afraid the French might topple the young US government with the help of the Democratic Republicans, led by his vice president, Thomas Jefferson.
The Sedition Act basically made it a federal crime to criticize the president. The act made it a federal crime to criticize Congress. Now, interestingly, it wasn't a federal crime to criticize the vice president, who was the head of the other political party.
Remember, back in those days, the president and vice president were the top two vote getters in each election, so they were rivals, not from the same party. The Sedition Act protected only one party and punished the other.
And the Adams administration felt that the Jeffersonians favored the French, and they called them disloyal.
The way the act was used was exclusively to prosecute Republican critics of the Adams administration.
Like Congressman Matthew Lyon, who spent 4 months in prison for criticizing the president.
This is ridiculous. This is a gross violation of the First Amendment idea, of the free speech idea.
You can't have a law that makes it a crime to bring the government or the president or the Congress into contempt or disrepute. That's what the First Amendment's about.